cold air is pushing its way southwards. It is going to feel an awful lot colder for all of us by the end of the week.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey, and here's what's coming up over the next hour. With the Met Police today issuing 20 fines over number 10 lockdown parties, is the Prime Minister once again back in trouble? What does it mean for the rest of his premiership? We'll be discussing that in detail. Also, as the conflict in Ukraine enters its second month, it looks like Russia may well be withdrawing some of its forces from around the capital. What is the military situation on the ground? And also, what about the alleged poisoning of the Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich? We'll be talking about how the peace talks in Turkey are going too. And as reports circulate that NATO is becoming divided on whether Ukraine could concede in those negotiations, we'll be getting the view from Paris as Emmanuel Macron tries to seek re-election. And we're in Scotland too, where the government there is facing heavy criticism due to undelivered promises on ferries, with one ex-shipyard boss describing the Scottish government's response as a propaganda exercise. As always, we want to hear from you too. Do get in touch. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. That and a hell of a lot more between now and 4 o'clock. But first, at the top of the hour, here's the news.
Good afternoon, it's 3:01. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The Queen has made her first major public appearance since contracting COVID last month. She attended Prince Philip's memorial service, with Prince Andrew playing a big role, walking her through Westminster Abbey. The Queen was also joined by other senior members of her family to remember the Duke of Edinburgh. The service of Thanksgiving featured elements Prince Philip had planned for his own funeral, but which weren't allowed due to coronavirus restrictions. Russia says it will drastically cut its military activity in Kiev and Chernihiv to create the conditions needed for further talks. It follows negotiations in Turkey, which the sanctioned Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich attended. He was reportedly poisoned during talks in Kiev earlier this month, prompting Ukraine's foreign minister to advise his team not to eat or drink anything. A Ukrainian negotiator says enough progress has now been made to warrant a meeting of the two presidents.
Intensive consultations are underway right now on some of the most important issues, the most important of which is the Agreement on International Security Guarantees for Ukraine, because with this agreement, we will be able to end the war as Ukraine needs. The second, very important issue is a ceasefire to solve all the humanitarian problems that have accumulated. They all need an immediate solution.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has told the Danish parliament that 100,000 people are still stranded in Mariupol. His comments come as new video emerges showing Russian tanks with Z markings heading towards the besieged city. Addressing the Danish parliament, President Zelensky called for tougher sanctions against Moscow.
We appeal to you and to the whole democratic world. The sanctions against Russia have to be strengthened. You must refrain from Russian oil. You must block trade with the Russian Federation. You must close your ports to Russian ships. This has to be the common policy of the European Union, of all the member countries.
Meanwhile, a Russian strike on an administration building in the port city of Mykolaiv has been captured on CCTV. Local officials say 7 people were killed and 22 were injured in the attack. Rescue workers are still sifting through the rubble after the regional headquarters was targeted. Here, a £38 million super yacht has been seized by the National Crime Agency. The vessel, named Fee, docked at Canary Wharf, has been identified as belonging to an unnamed Russian businessman. Russian ships were banned from UK ports at the start of this month. Downing Street has rejected P&O Ferry's claim that sacking 800 staff was necessary to protect the company. In a letter to the Transport Secretary, the Chief Executive, Peter Hepplethwaite, said complying with the government's request to rehire the fired workers would cause the company's collapse. He told MSPs the minimum wage will be paid to all workers if the law is changed.
The route that runs between Scotland and Northern Ireland as a domestic route, we are required to pay national minimum wage, and we do pay national minimum wage, and we will continue to pay national minimum wage. And if that were extended elsewhere, we will completely comply with it. And this has not been about rates of pay. This has been about a fundamentally different model.
20 fixed penalties are set to be issued for lockdown-breaching parties at Downing Street. The Met Police says they'll be referred to the Acro Criminal Office, which will be responsible for handing out the fines. A dozen events were investigated, and the Prime Minister is thought to have attended as many as 6. Scotland Yard says there could be more referrals in future. A missing teenager's school is renewing calls for help to find him. 14-year-old Rashid Al-Safi Bakar disappeared from his home in northwest London over a week ago. Police say it's completely out of character and there's growing concern for his well-being. Landlords who provide substandard social housing are set to be publicly named and shamed as part of plans to improve landlord services. Ministers also want to set up a resident panel so tenants can share their concerns directly with them. The government says it wants to halve the number of non-decent rented homes by 2030. Households are being encouraged to count the plastic packaging they throw away in a week as part of a campaign to tackle waste. The Big Plastic Count is being run to highlight how much plastic waste is leaving UK homes and how much is actually recycled. Campaigners want the government to commit to halving the UK's single-use plastic by 2025. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to the briefing with Darren.
A very good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. It is 7 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Thank you very much indeed for your coming in. Scotland Yard today has announced that they will be issuing an initial 20 fixed penalty notices to attendees of gatherings in Downing Street while lockdown restrictions were in place. That's led Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner to say that if the Prime Minister is handed one, he should resign for breaching those COVID restrictions. Well, yesterday, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak was answering questions at the Treasury Select Committee. The Chancellor has faced heavy criticism after his spring statement last Wednesday. A series of gaffes over the weekend, including him appearing to not know how to use a contactless card in a shop. Certainly hasn't helped. And, of course, with Ukraine and Russia holding possible peace negotiations today in Turkey, the Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich has been pictured at the talks after reports emerged yesterday that he'd been a victim of poisoning last month by Kremlin hardliners who were against his efforts to try and mediate a peace deal. Well, lots of politics around today. Talk about all of that. Delighted to say I'm joined from Westminster by the Conservative MP for North West Leicestershire, Andrew Bridgen. Andrew, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. Just first of all, on this Partygate kind of latest information, these 20 fixed penalty notices, we know you handed in your letter, you then withdrew it in terms of no confidence at the height of the scandal back in January. Do you think Labour are right? And do you agree with them now, Andrew, that if the Prime Minister is handed one of these fines himself, that he should resign?
Well, clearly that's a matter for the Prime Minister. I think he's indicated that he probably wouldn't. The only other mechanism for removing the Prime Minister would be Conservative MPs putting in letters and forcing a vote of confidence. Quite honestly, Darren, given the international situation in Ukraine and the threats to the UK economy and our security, that's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen in the foreseeable future. We need to get behind the Prime Minister, and that's why I took my letter out, because given the security concerns and the war in Ukraine, if there were a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister tomorrow, I think in the national interest, I'd have to vote for him. That's why I took my letter out a few weeks ago.
In saying that, I mean, I don't know if you saw this. The Times did a kind of focus group session on Boris Johnson's leadership, amongst other things in politics. And many of them are still pretty angry about all of this, Andrew. Some saying that he should face criminal charges. At the end of the day, I get your point about Ukraine, though, of course, I think Margaret Thatcher was removed, wasn't she, during the first Gulf War? Winston Churchill took over in the middle of the Second World War. Isn't this the key point, that if the Prime Minister is shown to have broken the very rules that he implemented on everyone else, rules that apply to all of us and millions of which adhere to it, that there will be a backlash from many of your own voters?
Oh, there already has been. In removing my letter of no confidence, it doesn't mean I in any way condone or and not appalled at some of the things that appear to have gone on in Number 10 during the lockdown. But what I believe at the moment is we need to be behind the Prime Minister. He's leading the international aid and the military aid for Ukraine. And if we were to indulge in votes of confidence and trying to remove the Prime Minister, as Labour probably want, I think we'll be playing into the hands of Mr Putin, and I'm not willing to do that at the moment. There may well be a reckoning still to come with regard to Partygate. We haven't seen the police report, we haven't seen the full Sue Gray report, we haven't had the names of the people who are going to be fined or may be fined in the future. But what I'm saying is I don't believe there'll be a confidence motion in the Prime Minister today or in the foreseeable future while this crisis continues.
Just very finally on this then, do you think the Prime Minister, knowing what we know now, misled Parliament back in December?
Well, if crime, well, one would appear that crimes have taken place or fines wouldn't be given out, which is incompatible with what the Prime Minister said at the dispatch box.
That sounds like a yes.
That was a yes.
OK.
But I still come back to my point that the Prime Minister is leading us through an international crisis, and now is not the time for undermining his position. There may well be a reckoning, but it will be in the future if there is.
OK, let's move on to the cost of living crisis. Are you frustrated that the Chancellor's not doing more?
Yes, and I raised my concerns on Thursday evening with Number 10. I think there'll have to be another budget, possibly an emergency budget, before summer recess. I don't think the measures laid out in the spring statement are going to be sufficient to get the public through to October. I'm also concerned that to have any knowledge of being in a position of responsibility, even for a household budget, you've got to be well in your 50s. And I wonder if there is that experience in number 10 of dealing with inflation that could be in double digits. I urge number 10 to seek the advice of former Conservative chancellors such as Nigel Lawson, Lord Lamont and Ken Clarke, and pick their brains of how we're going to deal with this. And also worry that, Darren, a lot of the public have never had to live under these sort of inflation rates, and whether they actually know what's coming down the track.
Yeah, indeed. And I would say that from my personal point of view as well, very used to low inflation and frankly low interest rates for the last 10, 15, 20 years or so. It is part, though, of what we're seeing with the economy. We know the pandemic's had a big impact. Though the OBR and the Chancellor seemed to accept some of this yesterday, there is a significant impact as well, maybe a greater significant impact from Brexit. The OBR saying, trade is down 15%, that it's cutting GDP growth by 4%. That's twice the impact that COVID has had.
I'm not sure if you're talking about the economy or inflation. I thought we were talking about inflation.
Well, I mean, we were
the inflationary risk internationally was created through COVID. Almost all countries have created more money, created new money to see their economies and their people through the COVID crisis. By creating more money, there's more money in circulation, chasing the same assets and goods. That's highly inflationary. We know how much money the Americans have printed in recent years. Some of that spills over to the UK and into the world economy. So the outlook was for considerably higher inflation before the crisis in Ukraine, which has exacerbated energy costs, and that in itself is inflationary. One could say it's been thrown petrol on the fire.
Yeah, I was just making the point that obviously one of the ways to get out of this, to see people's wages increase and potentially bring down inflation is through kind of economic growth, but also productivity. And I'm just saying, the OBR has said that that's been hit by Brexit. I'm just saying, is Brexit part of the narrative of why
clearly the economy has to adjust post-Brexit, and given that we've just been through the worst pandemic for 100 years, that's given little opportunity for us to exploit all the benefits of Brexit. But I mean, clearly, if we hadn't have left the European Union, we'd have been still waiting for our vaccines, and we wouldn't have outpaced them, which means our economy we wouldn't have been able to lift the lockdowns last summer when we did, and we would be in a completely different place. I mean, ultimately, I think whether it's by luck or by judgment, apart from obviously the vaccine procurement and rollout, which was one of the best in the world, the lockdowns and various easings, we seem to have come out, we've achieved herd immunity effectively, and we're in a pretty good place. We were the first economy in the world to actually release from restrictions. And unfortunately, we only had 5 hours before President Putin decided to start the next crisis by invading Ukraine.
Just very finally, while we've got you, Andrew, are you going to go to this party tonight that the Prime Minister's hosting? Some of your colleagues have been talking about warm beer and warm sandwiches.
Oh, I think it'll probably be a bit better than that. Apparently, we're having a parliamentary photograph first, which I presume will be in the chamber at end of business tonight, so about 7:30. And then apparently we're going to an undisclosed central London venue for a dinner, which I'm pretty good idea where that'll be.
It sounds fun. Andrew, thank you, as always. Andrew Bridgen there joining us from Parliament. Thank you for joining us on GB News. Let's bring in our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who is in Downing Street for us this afternoon. Tom, good afternoon to you. Just first of all, on Partygate, the fines, we don't have any details about who has been fined, but Number 10 have suggested if it was the Prime Minister, they would tell us.
That's exactly the line from Number 10, yes, but it doesn't go much further than that. The Prime Minister is the only person that Number 10 would announce were a fine to be given to him. Interestingly, not his wife, not the Cabinet Secretary, not anyone else suspected of attending events that may have breached the coronavirus regulations at the time. It's curious, of course. Number 10 itself is independent of this process. So those 20 fixed penalty notices, they may well be going to fewer than 20 people, of course, if one individual has more than one notice. But those 20 fixed penalty notices will be going to individuals, not to anyone else. So if some junior civil servant received one, they have no obligation to tell anyone that they had received that particular fixed penalty notice. It makes it all pretty dark, pretty misty, pretty hard to see through. But of course, this is only the beginning of what the Met Police are doing. In their statement this morning, the Met said that there may well be more to come, given more exploration of the details. Clearly a very complicated set of details, given that they've been at this for a couple of months now. Not all of these are open and shut cases. Of course, the building behind me is not just a house, it's a workplace too, a workplace for hundreds of people who were mixing in rooms and at some points cracking out bottles of wine. What changes from a work meeting, from a business event, into something more social? That is a very blurred line in a lot of these cases. And so clearly a lot of work is being done to determine exactly what happened and where, and what may cross a line and what may not. That work is still ongoing despite the announcement of 20 fixed penalty notices today.
Yeah, indeed, but at the same time, you know, at the start of the year, you and I and everyone else seem to be using the word febrile quite a lot to describe the mood at Westminster. It feels anything but that at the moment, in the sense the Prime Minister's got quite a lot of respite, maybe headroom to deal with all of this, but that the danger zone is not completely over. Is that fair?
That's certainly fair. Of course, I think the moment of maximum danger will not come until this all wraps up. And once again, I hate to use these words, Darren, but we need to wait for Sue Gray's report. Yes, it sounds a bit like déjà vu, but ultimately Sue Gray will be releasing the complete report, a new update to her report, unrestricted by the Met Police investigation when the police investigation concludes. Now, we don't know when that will be. It could be a few weeks. It could indeed be a few months, but when the police investigation concludes, that's when Sue Gray can have her unrestrained report. And at that point, that's when the Prime Minister has said he will address this all in the House. That may well be the moment of maximum danger, for there is nowhere else to hide when that happens.
And just very finally, before we let you go, just to focus on Parliament today, the opposition party have been bringing up this issue, haven't they, of Lord Ledbedev and his appointment to the House of Lords. Just bring us up to date what's been discussed in Parliament, what's come out, and apparently he sent a tweet as well.
He certainly has. Well, of course, Labour have been pushing this debate today because the Prime Minister who appointed Lord Ledbedev to the House of Lords allegedly received a warning from the House of Lords that there were security concerns around that appointment. Well, the Labour Party wants those warnings to be published, and that's what the debate is about today. For his part, Lord Ledbedev says that he totally doesn't mind any communications being published because he feels he has a clear conscience. And of course, a little bit of a sting for Keir Starmer, who clearly Lord Ledbedev is not particularly happy with. Well, he revealed today that Sir Keir Starmer texted him upon his appointment to the House of Lords, warmly welcoming him and congratulating him upon his appointment to the Lords. So that's a little bit embarrassing for Sir Keir Starmer. Of course, what the Labour Party are saying is that Keir Starmer didn't see any of the warnings from the House of Lords, the alleged warnings of security concerns at that time that he sent that text. But clearly it does show that everything was pretty chummy between Sir Keir and Lord Ledbedev at the time.
Tom, as always, appreciate your time and your analysis this afternoon. Tom Hobwood, our political correspondent. Join us live outside Downing Street. Thank you, Tom. It is 22 minutes past 3. We're going to pause there. Do get in touch. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I'm sure you've got views on Partygate, maybe even Lord Ledbedev as well, or you can tweet us at GBNews. Coming up in a couple of minutes, though, we're going to talk about Russia, war crimes, the military situation on the ground. The latest on those negotiations is in Istanbul with a security expert. What is happening in Ukraine today? That and much more after we take a quick break. First, here's the weather. It's getting cold for all of us.
Hello again. Things turning an awful lot colder over the next few days. Icy in places, and yes, some spots could see some snow, particularly during Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Here's the reason why. A cold front is slowly drifting southwards. As it wriggles and ripples, we could see some snow during tomorrow evening and overnight, and then it clears away, meaning that we're all in the cold air by Thursday. Let's get back to the rest of today, however, because the cold air is pushing into the far north, and we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place here for the wintry showers overnight. It could turn quite icy. Mostly rain in this zone heading south across southern Scotland into northern England. The showers in the south fading. Temperatures here close to average, but further north with the colder air, there will be a pretty extensive frost across Scotland to start Wednesday. Still potentially icy across northern Scotland with more snow showers coming in here, mixture of sleet and hail at low levels. Certainly some snow over the higher routes. And then this zone of wet weather sinking south through the day, so a dull damp start for Northern Ireland, Northern England, turning brighter later. The rain pushing into the Midlands and East Anglia, maybe turning to snow over hills in Northern England. Brighter conditions in the southwest, still quite mild here, but some afternoon showers, 12 or 13. Elsewhere, a big change, just 7 in Belfast compared to temperature in the teens here during today. The colder air continues to track southwards, and this is the area of concern during Wednesday evening and overnight. An area of wet weather across the Midlands, southern England, South Wales that could provide some snow, certainly over hills, but even to lower levels for a time that may still be around on Thursday morning. So you may wake up to a covering across some surfaces on Thursday morning. It could be icy as well. That does tend to move out of the way, and then we're left with some wintry showers in the east. Again, a mixture of sleet, hail, and some snow, and some spells of sunshine, particularly in the west. But look at the temperatures come Thursday. 20 degrees last week. By Thursday, 5 to 8, and feeling colder when you add on that wind.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
A very welcome back. Now, a US official has cast doubt on claims that the Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich and Ukrainian peace negotiators were victims of poisoning earlier this month after a meeting in Ukraine. They suffered symptoms including painful and constant tearing, red eyes and peeling skin on the hands and faces, which the investigative website Bellingcat has said that they were symptoms consistent with poisoning with chemical weapons. Well, to join me now to discuss that and much more is the former British Army officer, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford. Stuart, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. Just first of all, on this alleged poisoning, the Americans seem to have cast doubt on it and the Russians are denying it.
Well, absolutely. It's another classic sort of information, misinformation and disinformation scenario. There's one or two things that are slightly odd about it. It's actually quite difficult to poison someone slightly. And so it would appear that either a very low dose was administered by some means or other, of what nature I wouldn't really know. But of course, the Russians are denying it. So I guess we'll not know until a further investigation takes place. But it may be the Russians just putting down a marker saying we can reach you wherever you are. But I don't know about that.
Let's move on to the military side of the campaign. Quite a significant moment today, it seems, at least anyway, with these negotiations taking place in Turkey, that the Russians seem to be now publicly saying that they're not going to encroach anymore in the north of Ukraine, particularly around the capital. Is this a sign that Russia's accepting that it is stalled there, or is this buying them time, do you reckon?
Well, I suspect actually it's a bit of both. There's no doubt that the progress in the north around Kiev and Chernihiv has been disappointing from a Russian point of view. And it's quite clear they don't have enough troops to take the capital. So they may have accepted defeat there. I mean, it looks as if they're actually going into retreat. But that might free up troops to concentrate elsewhere. And I think the big thing that they want to do is create and maintain the land bridge between the Crimea and the Donetsk region.
This is all quite difficult, though, isn't it, in a sense, because there's going to have to be a compromise deal, but a compromise deal that is going to involve potentially Ukraine giving up quite a lot of its territory, while it's got a big proportion of its population still very heavily armed. It's quite tricky, isn't it, for President Zelensky?
Well, it's a really difficult one. I mean, all wars end up with either abject defeat and the imposition of conditions by the victor, or compromise through negotiations where both sides agree, and both sides have to compromise. It's going to be a difficult one because I think you're quite right that the Ukraine will have to cede some territory. And there's some talk today about there being a 15-year sort of consultation period over the future of Crimea. And also that Russia might not be averse to the Ukraine joining the EU, which is not NATO, of course, but it's it's better than nothing. It's just at some point people have to sit down and talk and bring this dreadful war to an end.
Yeah, of course, one of the criteria for joining the EU is that you're not involved in border disputes with a neighbouring country, which would be quite difficult to solve if they want to get the accession talks going. Just very finally, Stuart, is there an acceptance, do you think, that looking back on all of this in hindsight now, in the second month of this war, that Russia simply weren't up to the job, if that was the original intention, and it seemed to be, to take over Ukraine, that they didn't have the right number of troops and the equipment simply failed them?
Yes, a combination of all these things. I mean, nobody apart from Putin and his closest circle will know exactly what the strategic aim was at the outset. But it looked, as we've said before on here, it looked as if they thought they could pretty easily drive into Kiev and decapitate the government and impose their own government. To that end, there probably aren't enough troops. In fact, there are almost certainly not enough troops, certainly not enough logistics and supplies. And so, in sort of layman's terms, they've bitten off more than they can chew. And they will have to settle for something less than perhaps they originally wished to do.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, joining us from Edinburgh. Thank you for joining us here on GB News. OK, we're going to pause there on the briefing this afternoon. We'll be back in a couple of minutes, but first, let's bring you up to date the very latest news.
Good afternoon, it's 3:32. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The Queen and other senior members of the royal family have paid tribute to the late Prince Philip at a memorial service in London. Queen Elizabeth was accompanied by her son, Prince Andrew, from Windsor Castle, who also walked with her through Westminster Abbey. The service of Thanksgiving featured elements the Duke of Edinburgh had planned for his own funeral, but which weren't allowed due to coronavirus restrictions. Russia says it will drastically cut its military activity in Kiev and Chernihiv to create the conditions needed for further talks. It follows negotiations in Turkey, which the sanctioned Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich attended. A Ukrainian negotiator says enough progress has now been made to warrant a meeting of the two presidents. Here, a £38 million super yacht has been seized by the National Crime Agency. The vessel, named Fee, docked at Canary Wharf, has been identified as belonging to an unnamed Russian businessman. Downing Street has rejected P&O Ferry's claim that sacking 800 staff was necessary to protect the company. In a letter to the Transport Secretary, the Chief Executive, Peter Hebblethwaite, said complying with the government's request to rehire the fired workers would cause the company's collapse. He told MSPs the minimum wage will be paid to all workers if the law is changed. 20 fixed penalties are set to be issued for lockdown-breaching parties at Downing Street. The Met Police says they'll be referred to the Acro Criminal Office, which will be responsible for handing out the fines. A dozen events were investigated, and the Prime Minister is thought to have attended as many as 6. Scotland Yard says there could be more referrals in future. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. In a moment, it's back to the briefing with Darren.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News, GB Views at gbnews.uk, 23 minutes to 4 o'clock. Paul says, I've had to say that there are far more important things to worry about than those who attended a few parties. An expensive waste of time and taxpayer money. Please stop trying to make much ado about nothing. Leave it to a disingenuous Labour and the Boris and Tory haters. This is, of course, on Partygate. Lots of you getting in touch about that. Marianne says, for goodness sake, this whole saga needs to be put to bed. The press needs to get some perspective and balance of what is important in today's climate. Perhaps Partygate is the last thing on people's minds, except those in opposition who would love to make the most of the pressing matter. And James says, the Green lobby missed the key point in life. Oil and gas will be required for decades. It is used for far more things than heat and power. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Do get in touch. Always keen to hear a diverse range of views here on GB News. Or indeed, you can tweet us as well. We're on TV, online, and on your DAB digital radio. And we're going to talk now about actually the Green issue and the Green lobby, because there is a tug of war going on over Boris Johnson's promise to slash carbon emissions, as opponents and supporters both boast of fresh backing from MPs. The Net Zero Scrutiny Group, a caucus of Conservative Party MPs determined to give the Prime Minister's green agenda a rough ride, was previously thought to comprise only 20 MPs. However, there are reports that the group may now have expanded to 58 members of Parliament. The rise in climate-sceptic MPs comes as a reported rift between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor is said to be heavily focused on the funding of the Prime Minister's green agenda. Well, join me now from Westminster is the Conservative MP for Thanet South and leader of that Net Zero Scrutiny Group, Craig McKinley. Craig, thank you so much indeed for joining us. You seem to have paused. I don't know if Craig can hear us. No, and we have lost him. We will try and get back in connection with Craig when we can. Particularly on this issue, as I say, of the green agenda. We know many are questioning the need, at least in the short term, to hit these targets when it comes to net zero. But we'll try and get that reconnection up to Westminster in a couple of minutes' time. But first, let's move on to Wales, because a new body formed by the Welsh Government has been set with the task of reducing carbon emissions. Wales currently accounts for 20% of the UK's carbon emissions, so it's full steam ahead to lower the percentage ahead of the net zero target for 2050. So this is the discussion that's happening, of course, in Wales, separate from what is happening in England. Well, our reporter, Lily Hewitson, has been sent to Port Talbot to report on all of this, and this is indeed her dispatch.
Considering people in Wales make up just 5% of the population, at first glance these figures do seem startling, but this is specifically about the UK's industrial and business carbon emissions, not emissions as a whole. 20% is still high though, and the Welsh Government know they've got quite a task on their hand to reduce this percentage. Now, they've recently set up Net Zero Industry Wales, which is a body that aims to drive down those carbon emissions here in Wales. Now, it'll specifically look at reducing emissions and in the business and industry sectors here, which are particularly high here in Wales in comparison with other parts of the UK, which generally have a more service-based economy. But something like this isn't going to come cheap. I'm just in front of Tata Steelworks in Port Talbot, which is a huge part of Wales's industrial heritage. But this means that it plays a really big part in the overall UK emissions and when it comes to the business and industry sectors. Now, it's estimated that it'll cost around £2 billion to just decarbonise Tata Steelworks, which is just behind me. And that's just one part of the general business and industry carbon emissions in the UK and here in Wales. Now, the Net Zero Industry Wales body has clear priorities when it comes to collaborating with business and academic partners when it comes to reducing carbon emissions here in Wales. However, the body only has £150,000 to play with every year for the next 3 years. So there are real concerns about whether there's enough funding to deal with this very big problem. Now, when announcing the scheme yesterday here at Tata, the Welsh Government Economy Minister Vaughan Gething said the creation of Net Zero Industry Wales is an important step forward. Without this action, Wales and the rest of the UK will not achieve our net zero target by 2050.
There you go, that was Lily Hewitson reporting from Port Talbot. Still trying to get Craig McKinley on the line from Westminster. We'll hopefully get to the issue of net zero wars, as we're branding it, a little later on in the programme. But let's go to Scotland now as we move around the United Kingdom, because it's got another ferry fiasco on its hands. However, this time it's not related to P&O. Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister, has denied her government rushed a deal with Ferguson Marine to build 2 ferries in order to make an announcement at an SNP party conference. Jim McCall, who's a former advisor to the Scottish Government and a fervent supporter of Scottish independence in 2014, said the decision to overrule concerns from the government-owned ferry procurer Caledonian Maritime Assets Limited was made by the former Finance Secretary, Darren McCaffrey, and the First Minister. Well, an audit report from Scotland, published last week, said the contracts were given the go-ahead despite not having a fully refund guarantee, and criticised the lack of documentary evidence as to why the decision was taken in the first place. Well, join me now to discuss all of this is the Scottish Conservative MSP for Central Scotland, Graham Simpson. Graham, very good afternoon to you. Quite extraordinary, this story, in many regards. We're seeing, I think, 230 million quid awarded to build these 2 ferries, and now the work has been outsourced to Turkey.
Well, the work for 2 different ferries has been outsourced to Turkey. The 2 ferries that you're talking about are still sitting in a yard on the Clyde, unfinished. Years late, massively over budget, over 2.5 times the original budget. And what we don't know from the Scottish Government is why they awarded the contract to that yard, going against the advice of their experts.
Yeah, indeed. But do you think in some ways they're trying to blame the former finance minister? Is Nicola Sturgeon trying to deflect some attention?
So what they tried to do last week was trying to pin the blame on Derek Mackay, who was the transport minister at the time the contract was awarded, a junior ministerial role. He, of course, had a boss. That boss was Keith Brown, who's still in the Scottish Cabinet, and John Swinney, who was the Finance Secretary at the time, signed off the money. So we need some clarity from the SNP. They are refusing to say, other than Derek Mackay, who was behind this decision and why they made it. And of course, Jim McCall has said, it looked as though it was for political gain. They made the announcement at the SNP conference. So why wouldn't you conclude that that's exactly what it was all about? And it wasn't about actually building ferries, because they've not been built.
But at the same time, the First Minister's denying all of this and saying that there were proper checks in place. Is it simply that you don't believe her, or that you want to see the detail of what she's claiming?
Well, there weren't proper checks. If there'd been proper checks, then they wouldn't have signed the contract. Their own body responsible for buying ships, for buying ferries, said, don't go ahead with this deal. We've got concerns. And yet they still went ahead. Now, had they listened to that body called CMAL, then maybe we wouldn't be in the mess we are. We've ended up with 2 unfinished ferries sat in that yard, and the ridiculous situation where the SNP are now having to buy ferries from Turkey.
Quite extraordinary stuff indeed. How much of an impact do you think this is going to have on the local elections, of course, taking place, in early May in Scotland, like they are in other parts of the United Kingdom? Do you think this is going to come up at the doorstep, or do you think many of your voters will still be concerned, given what might be revealed in the weeks to come, about those parties in Downing Street?
This is a real hot topic here in Scotland. People are absolutely disgusted at that colossal waste of time and money, and actually the people that really matter in all this are the islanders who rely on ferries to get about. A ferry to an islander is almost like a bus to you and I, and very often they're just not able to do the basic things in life, like go to hospital appointments, do shopping on the mainland, go and visit relatives. And I've been speaking to islanders, and they're at their wits' end. because it goes beyond these two ferries. We've got a ferry system in Scotland that's in chaos.
Just very finally, just out of fairness, because we've been asking everyone else this today, we've been reporting, of course, on the fixed penalty fines that have been handed out. I mean, do you agree with the Labour Party that if the Prime Minister receives one personally for breaking the rules that he indeed implemented and insisted everyone else should follow, if he's broken those rules, potentially even misled Parliament, I mean, is it your thought still that he should resign? My own personal view is I would need to see the details. I mean, obviously that's not happened yet. So, we're being entirely speculative. I don't really want to get into speculation. Did you not want him to resign a couple of months ago?
So I didn't call for anything. Okay. I've said nothing on the matter.
So you're going to wait and see?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed for joining us down the line there. From Holyrood, much appreciated for your time. That is the Scottish MEP, Graham Simpson, the Scottish MEP for Scotland Central. Lots of you getting in touch this afternoon. I want to get to your views in a couple of minutes' time, but we just want to return back now to what's happening in Ukraine, where NATO allies are reportedly split on a strategy over whether it should agree to compromise on potentially a peace deal. Reports suggest that Paris and Berlin are seeking further dialogue with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, including, though, it must be said, other countries, particularly in southern Europe. But that seems in opposition to the UK and Poland, as well as the Baltic states, who have doubted that Putin is serious when it comes to negotiating an acceptable peace deal. So what is diplomacy like? Is NATO united? Well, joining me from Paris is the Telegraph columnist Anne-Elisabeth Mutti, who joined us from the French capital. Thank you very much indeed, Anne-Elisabeth, for joining us. Just give us a sense of what's been happening there in France, because we get the impression from the outside that in many ways Emmanuel Macron has been the go-to guy, if you like, for Vladimir Putin. They've certainly spoken on the phone more than any other EU leader.
Emmanuel Macron has believed that he could reason with Vladimir Putin, and he started as early as the 5th of February when he went to Moscow on his own, not having checked with any other Western leaders. And before the war, 3 weeks before the war started, and he absolutely believed that he could push back Vladimir Putin, and that didn't work. When the war started, he went back, and by that time, he started consulting with Emmanuel Macron, with Olaf Scholz of Germany, with Biden, Anthony Blinken in America, and it was a more concentrated way of diplomacy. And his idea was we need to have channels open. But like everybody else, including the Ukrainians, who didn't expect the war to start on 24th of February, Macron was essentially blindsided by the Russians, not only because they did attack Ukraine, but because their avowed intention is to take all of Ukraine and reduce it to a Russian province again, deny its nationality. And in that respect, it's probably a good idea to keep having conversations with Russia, but France should not be, or any negotiator shouldn't be blinded to the fact that most of the time when you negotiate something with the Russians, such as, for instance, humanitarian corridors, they always break their word. I don't think there's one example of a humanitarian corridor that was open, for instance, without being bombed, especially targeting the civilians by the Russians. So Emmanuel Macron, who's now 2 weeks from the first round of a contested presidential election, needs to be convincing, not look like he's backtracking entirely, but at the same time, he needs to be convincing on whether he can achieve anything with the Russians.
In saying that, he's been singled out, hasn't he, by President Zelensky for not doing enough. And we don't know. I think it's pretty clear, actually, I say we don't know, that France hasn't actually given any military aid to Ukraine, even though it's the second largest defence spender in Europe.
No, France has delivered weapons to Ukraine. The French army has a tradition not to communicating. The French military do not communicate. They have delivered weapons to Ukraine, but it hasn't been as much as some of the countries. It certainly hasn't been an effort like, for instance, Poland. And on the other hand, Zelensky has also complimented Emmanuel Macron for trying to keep channels open. But the situation of Zelensky is now that his country is being bombed with means that we haven't seen since the Second World War. And that he has no reason anymore to believe in the good faith of the Russians, and therefore you can question whether France can actually achieve anything. It was not just hubris, and it was just not just to get elected, but it doesn't look like now it's going to work out. And the noise we hear from Russia, from those people who can communicate out of Russia, who are not around Putin, is also that if Putin gets even concessions, he can not seize all of Ukraine simply because he can't. And having got what he looked like he wanted in the first place, like all eastern Ukraine, he can consolidate his power when at the end of this terrible war, even though he has killed more Russian soldiers than were killed in any conflict since World War II.
In saying that, this war does seem to have benefited, doesn't it, Emmanuel Macron himself, in terms of his poll ratings ahead, as you say, of the French election next month, at the expense of his far-right rivals like Eric Zemmour and Marine Le Pen, who have had their questions about their links to Vladimir Putin raised over the last couple of months.
Absolutely. I mean, there are two things. The other thing is that at the end of the day, Emmanuel Macron has been in the job for 5 years, and therefore he understands foreign policy more than the candidates who have no experience do. And I don't think there's any candidate who is actually in his job or close to his job in any of the candidates left and right. And among the candidates, you've got three candidates who are pro-Putin or were pro-Putin and are either hunkering quietly like Marine Le Pen, who was financed by Russia for her last campaign bid 5 years ago. It was official. Others have kept on saying that Putin was somebody reasonable and that we should be traditional. Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who's the French Corbyn, if you like, and who's gaining traction now because the rest of the left does not exist. And Eric Zemmour, who has said in the past, and it's come back to haunt him, that Putin was a great patriot, Russian patriot, and France needed a Putin. And of course, the French see what's happening in Ukraine, and that's not helping those candidates. So the combination of lack of experience and bad choices mean that Macron's fiercest opposers are actually in a bad shape.
OK, Anne-Elizabeth from Paris there, thank you very much for joining us, and I'm sure we'll be in touch ahead of those elections, as you say, first round in a couple of weeks' time. OK, let's end the programme on your views. Lots of you been getting in touch this afternoon, very animated about Partygate, one way or another. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Ian says that the supporters who wish to ignore the parties during lockdown do not get the point. He is a serial liar, and this is just one of many. Do they really want our Prime Minister to be proven a liar to Parliament and continue? Lynn says, for God's sake, stop trying to drag Partygate into every interview. Give it a rest. Brian says that there is... Ian says, what is wrong with these politicians? Boris blatantly lied. He said no parties, and now at least 20 fines for partygoers are to be served. How much evidence do they require? And very finally, Brian says there is a war on our borders, people dying in the thousands. We're still recovering from a worldwide pandemic. There is a cost of living crisis, and yet all the media are covering is a party and well-deserved slapping. Always get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk. OK, well, that is it for the briefing from me for today. We'll be back again at 3 o'clock tomorrow. The Prime Minister in front of the Liaison Committee, a group of MPs tomorrow afternoon. We'll take coverage of that, of course, after the last PMQs before the Easter recess. Tom is here at 9:30 in the morning, Gloria at 12. Up next, it's Colin Brazier, 4 to 6 p.m, just across the room, getting ready to go on air. But before all that, let's bring you up to date with the very latest weather this afternoon. Join Alex Deakin in the Met Office. Getting cold. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello again. Things turning an awful lot colder over the next few days. Icy in places, and yes, some spots could see some snow, particularly during Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Here's the reason why. A cold front is slowly drifting southwards. As it wriggles and ripples, we could see some snow during tomorrow evening and overnight, and then it clears away, meaning that we're all in the cold air by Thursday. Let's get back to the rest of today, however, because the cold air is pushing into the far north, and we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place here for the wintry showers overnight. It could turn quite icy. Mostly rain in this zone heading south across southern Scotland into northern England. The showers in the south fading. Temperatures here close to average, but further north with the colder air, there will be a pretty extensive frost across Scotland to start Wednesday. Still potentially icy across northern Scotland with more snow showers coming in here, mixture of sleet and hail at low levels. Certainly some some snow over the higher routes. And then this zone of wet weather sinking south through the day, so a dull damp start for Northern Ireland, Northern England, turning brighter later. The rain pushing into the Midlands and East Anglia, maybe turning to snow over hills in Northern England. Brighter conditions in the southwest, still quite mild here, but some afternoon showers, 12 or 13. Elsewhere, a big change, just 7 in Belfast compared to temperatures in the teens here during today. The colder air continues to track southwards, and this is the area of concern during Wednesday evening and overnight. An area of wet weather across the Midlands, Southern England, South Wales that could provide some snow, certainly over hills, but even to lower levels for a time that may still be around on Thursday morning. So you may wake up to a covering across some surfaces on Thursday morning. It could be icy as well. That does tend to move out of the way, and then we're left with some wintry showers in the east. Again, a mixture of sleet, hail, and some snow, and some spells of sunshine, particularly in the west. But look at the temperatures come Thursday. 20 degrees last week, by Thursday 5 to 8, and feeling colder when you add on that wind.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and